Russian President Vladimir Putin recognized the breakaways of Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republic as independent states. His recent statements on the situation could be crucial for the resolution of the conflict. In Brazil, the death toll resulting from heavy rains and landslides in Petropolis rose to 176. Next March, it'll be 60 years since the 1962 Evian Accord signing that ended the Algerian War of Independence from France. Meanwhile, France struggles with its Algerian past. Hi, this is From the South. I'm your news anchor, Diego Martin, from the teleSUR studios in Havana. We begin with the news. Russian President Vladimir Putin's recent statements on the situation in the Donbass region could be crucial to the development and resolution of the conflict. The head of state recognized the breakaways of Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics as independent states. Luhansk and Donetsk separatist authorities report Ukrainian government-coordinated shellings and attacks on the Donbass as tensions rise due to the pressure mounting from NATO and U.S. interventionist claims of false flag operations in Ukraine. In this context, the Russian parliament voted by overwhelming majority in favor of a motion calling for Putin to acknowledge the independence of the People's Republics of Donetsk and Luhansk. The Russian leader also referred to how NATO and the U.S. have manufactured a hostile image of Russia using media and terror narratives to promote aggressive stances that support any pretext for an invasion in Eastern Europe. Putin also warned the Western coalition will use the latest events in the Donbass region as a pretext to impose more sanctions on Russia. With this in mind, the president made clear his nation plans to act in consequence with its rights to impose countermeasures.
In this regard, I deem it necessary to make a decision that should have been made a long time ago, to immediately recognize the independence and sovereignty of Donetsk People's Republic and Lugansk People's Republic. And I would like to request the Federal Assembly to support, to back this decision and ratify the agreement of friendship and mutual help with both republics. We will draft this document and sign these documents in the near future.
People celebrate in the Donetsk region with the news of Russian President Vladimir Putin's recognition of Luhansk and Donetsk's legitimate sovereignty as independent states. This transpires amid the heightened tensions and growing worries of a Ukrainian invasion backed by U.S. and NATO interests in the Slavic country's contested east. In Donetsk, people took to the streets and gathered waving flags and chantings. And not only is Russia once again setting the pace for the way the pieces are going to move on the geopolitical chessboard, but also other nations such as Syria have already confirmed they are considering legitimating the independence of Luhansk and Donetsk from Kiev. United States and its European allies rushed to react after Russian President Vladimir Putin's announcement of Moscow's recognition of the Donbass territories as independent states free of Kiev's jurisdiction. From the White House, the government's press secretary Jen Psaki said on Monday that the U.S. administration is ready to, quote-unquote, immediately respond to this step. After Putin's signing of decrees that recognize the Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics as independent states, United States President Joe Biden issued an executive order banning U.S. trade with Luhansk and Donetsk. This was followed by reactions from other governments who took part in the echoing of the false flag operation narrative involving the alleged Russian invasion on Ukraine, which Moscow has denied time and time again, insisting on a diplomatic solution to defuse the tensions. Governments of the European Union promised to respond with sanctions to Russia's recognition of Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republic's independence. The High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy of the European Union, Josep Borrell, spoke of the Kremlin's decision as a blatant violation of international law, the territorial integrity of Ukraine, and the Minsk agreements, also expressing the bloc's determination to respond with new sanctions against Moscow, despite recent efforts from European leaders and diplomats such as France and Germany to ease the conflict, seeking talks with Russia. Violations on the Minsk agreements were also reported by Luhansk and Donetsk authorities, who reported Ukrainian military operations that have damaged civilians, forcing many to evacuate to Russia. The Syrian head of state Bashar al-Assad said Damascus would be ready to recognize the People's Republics of Donetsk and Luhansk. State Duma Deputy Dmitry Savlin confirmed this as he disclosed having spoken to the Syrian president, who assured him Syria would most likely acknowledge Donetsk and Luhansk as allies and friends after Russia's recognition of independence of the territories from Ukraine, since there is already a president with South Ossetia and Abkhazia in the southern area of the Greater Caucasus. Russian President Vladimir Putin's spokesman said on Monday that there were no plans yet for a new summit with United States President Joe Biden, contradicting claims by the White House, who had said that the leaders agreed in principle to meet. Speaking to reporters, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said there were no concrete plans for a new Putin-Biden meeting, but that they did not deny the possibility, explaining that a gathering between both heads of state could be arranged quickly if necessary. Peskov also stated that talks between the Russian Foreign Ministry and the U.S. State Department will continue. The spokesman announced that Putin had summoned a large-format meeting of Russia's Security Council on Monday, and that the president would hold calls with several international leaders. Let's focus on eastern Ukraine, where at least 50 ceasefire violations by Ukrainian troops were reported in the self-proclaimed Luhansk People's Republic. According to Ivan Filiponenko, a spokesman for Luhansk People's Militia, at least 3 civilians were injured in Donbass, where over 50 violations of the ceasefire on behalf of Kiev's forces were recorded in the past 24 hours. The representative also said the Luhansk People's Republic's mission to the Joint Center for Control and Coordination on the ceasefire has already recorded 66 violations and over 24 shellings of facilities. The militia's spokesman stated that weapons prohibited by the Minsk agreements are actively used in the offensive actions. The latest bombing resulted in 1 civilian having his lower limb amputated. In addition, 2 residents sustained shrapnel wounds. Damage to the residential buildings was also recorded. Adding to the unstable situation in Donbass, a car exploded at the parking lot near the government building at the office of the self-proclaimed Luhansk People's Republic at the Joint Center for the Control and Coordination of the Ceasefire. According to a spokesman from the Luhansk People's Militia, the head of the office and his driver were injured. Responders from the Emergency Situations Ministry said the explosion was heard across the vicinities and called for citizens to remain calm, be vigilant, and avoid moving about the area. Meanwhile, the shelling of civilian locations throughout the Donbass region continues. Schools in Donetsk were damaged as a result of the bombings, as well as buildings surrounding Stanitsi and Luhansk, all during early hours of Monday. 510 refugees arrived at around the same time in Saratov, Russia. We're going to take a short break now. Please join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. In the southeastern Brazilian city of Petropolis, the wearing rescue work continued. In the last few hours, more bodies have been recovered, bringing the death toll from the mudslides and downpour of last week to 176. The heavy rainstorm that devastated part of the city has also left nearly 200 people injured, while the search for dozens of missing people continues. The storm has left a large-scale trail of destruction since last Tuesday, making it the city's worst weather tragedy ever, according to the latest report from the city's police. In addition to the 176 fatalities, the civil police informed a provisional list accounts for 117 people missing. It is precisely the search for survivors under the rubble that is keeping the rescue teams busy. In the last few hours, the civil defense issued a report confirming 775 incidents were a direct consequence of the landslides. The Japanese government suspended transport in the north of the country due to a heavy snowfall in the region. Air and rail transport on the island of Hokkaido has been almost completely canceled due to a heavy snowfall. According to the press, 70% of train rides in the city of Sapporo were suspended and 140 flights at Chitose Airport were canceled. The bad weather conditions caused power outages and traffic congestion. During the storm, at least a dozen people were injured in car accidents. Spain held an official day of mourning for the victims of the Spanish trawler that sank in stormy waters off Canada and left 9 people dead and 12 missing. Of the 24 people who were on board the Villa de Pitancho, 16 are said to be Spanish and the other 8 were identified as Peruvian and Ghanaian nationals. The ship went down off the eastern coast of Canada early on February 15th in what was Spain's worst fishing tragedy in nearly 40 years. A Canadian rescue mission was launched, deploying a rescue ship and helicopter as well as fishing boats in the region. Weather conditions, including rough seas and fierce winds, difficulted the search for survivors. The only 3 crew members found alive so far were huddled in lifeboats suffering from hypothermia. They were airlifted to safety by a Canadian Coast Guard helicopter. Spanish Foreign Minister José Manuel Álvarez had asked his Canadian counterpart Melanie Joly for the research to resume when the weather eased.
Today we have declared national mourning as a result of a terrible shipwreck of the Canadian coast, and first of all we would like to convey our condolences and our solidarity to the families of the victims, their friends of this terrible shipwreck, and also the loss of lives of the ship Villa de Pitancho. Today I plan to travel to Santiago de Compostela to accompany the families in the repatriation of the bodies of the deceased, of the fishermen, and also to receive the 3 survivors of this terrible shipwreck.
In Guatemala, dozens of indigenous communities gathered in north of the Alta Verapaz to reorganize in the struggle against monocropping. Members of the Guatemala Indigenous Association, Madre Tierra, reiterated that they continue their organized resistance against the expansion of monoculture at the hands of transnational corporations. In a release, the indigenous organization expressed that under no circumstances should the national government and private companies consider large-scale monocropping as a sustainable source of renewable energy. The ancient peoples also denounced that the intense spread of palm oil crops has caused the expropriation of land from indigenous communities, the privatization of water sources, and the increase in the pollution of soils and ecosystems due to the high use in pesticides and agrochemicals. This Sunday, the executive of the Dominican Republic announced the beginning of the construction of a wall of approximately 160 kilometers long on the border with Haiti, an initiative that seeks to stop migration and smuggling of goods. The fence will cover more than half of the 392-kilometer-long border shared by Haiti and the Dominican Republic and will be 3.9 meters tall. According to the presentation made by authorities at the inaugural ceremony, the structure will have 170 watchtowers and 71 access gates. Humanitarian organizations have warned that nearly 40% of the Haitian population requires humanitarian aid, and almost 500,000 citizens in that country live without access to running water, in a crisis severely aggravated after the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse in July 2020.
Early last year, I announced to the nation our decision to initiate the process for the construction of a smart fence on our border with Haiti, driven by the need to ensure our national security, regulate the migratory flows, and protect all citizens by guaranteeing their rights and obligations. At that time, I met with the relevant state bodies and with serious experts to analyze the situation at the border and to work together to draw up a roadmap that would lead us to complete the process. We took into account opinions on how to approach this great project, and since last March I announced that the construction of the fence was in the planning stage. Today I'm meeting with you again to begin the definitive construction work that we had announced after months and the respective tender process. As you are well aware, the serious institutional and security crisis that our neighboring country is going through has led the people to a worrying situation of political and social instability, as well as huge economic and food crisis, and we have expressed several times and in different places that it must be overcome by Haitians themselves and attended to by the entire international community.
Human rights defenders in Haiti demanded on Sunday respect for the rights of textile workers who have asked for a wage increase and have repeatedly denounced police repression in recent demonstrations in the capital Port-au-Prince. In a press release, defenders recalled that the situation in the country has been worsening as the price of the basic food basket increases. For this, textile workers have been demanding a salary increase of 1,500 gourds, equivalent to about $14.7, but demonstrations have been strongly repressed, leaving at least 13 injured. The statement rejects aggressions against peaceful protests and indicates that demands for improvements in labor are a constitutional guarantee. The coordinator of the National Center for Haitian Workers, Dominique confirmed that he will meet with the government in order to reach a stable agreement. Colombia's population supports the Pacto Histórico coalition during its election campaign. According to polls, Pacto Histórico is a political party preferred by voters. This organization is aiming to renew the bicameral Congress on the 13th of March, as well as presidential elections held on May 29th. So far, people are participating in proselytizing activities in different territories of the nation, led by presidential pre-candidate Gustavo Petro. Among the most important proposals of the historic pact is to achieve free public health care financed by the state, to achieve free equality education, and an employment policy that guarantees decent pay, stability, and social security. And in Chile, presidential handover and power transfer procedures started with just over 2 weeks to go before President-elect Gabriel Boric takes office. The meetings between the delegations for the transfer of presidential powers will extend until March 11th, the date for the swearing-in of President-elect Gabriel Boric. During this time, the authorities will evaluate the challenges that Boric will face during his term. The migratory crisis on the northern border with Bolivia and the militarization of the south, where there is a territorial conflict between large forestry companies and the Mapuche people, are some of the issues that will be discussed at the meetings. There's more news coming up after a final short break. Please stay with us. Hi, welcome back. France struggles with its Algerian past. Next March, it'll be 60 years since the 1962 Evian Accord signing that ended the Algerian War of Independence from France. During this election campaign in 2017, Emmanuel Macron, the first French president born after the war, infuriated the right wing by calling the colonization of Algeria a crime against humanity. He also said that it was time France looked at its past in the face. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy had admitted the colonial system was profoundly unjust before him. Still, Macron has rejected calls for France to apologize or repent for its time in Algeria. On Monday, Mali's lawmakers approved a plan allowing the military junta to rule for up to 5 years despite regional sanctions imposed on the country over delayed elections. 120 members of Mali's 121-seat interim parliament voted to allow the junta to rule for up to 5 years in line with the earlier junta proposal and without mentioning the date for democratic elections. After staging a coup in an impoverished Sahel state in August 2020, the junta initially announced elections for February 2022, but proposed a ruling extension on December, citing security concerns. In response, the Economic Community of West African States last month imposed a trade embargo and closed its borders with Mali. Also, tensions with the junta contributed to France's announcement last week that it was withdrawing its troops from Mali, which are deployed under the anti-jihadist Barkhane force in the Sahel.
The agenda of this extraordinary meeting focused exclusively on the examination of the draft law on the revision of the transition charter that we have just adopted almost unanimously by the members of the National Transition Council. It is a feeling of joy and pride when the occupying forces leave your territory. You can only rejoice and congratulate the patriotic courage of the authorities, especially the patriotic president's deliberated Assimi Goïta. When the Barkhane forces withdraw, it is the beginning of the end of the war in Mali, and when the occupying forces leave Mali, it is the beginning of the end of the war.
In Palestine, Israeli military arbitrarily arrested 40 citizens in the West Bank region. Media reported that on Monday, Zionist troops stormed several West Bank towns, including Al-Arkal, Yamoun, Deir Abu Mishal, Silwar, Nara, and Al-Isaiya in the Israeli-occupied territories in East Jerusalem, where they also attacked Al-Arub and Alpha war camps. 10 Palestinian citizens have already been arrested by the Israeli forces on the eve of the attack using the same tactics. A Syrian army checkpoint stopped a United States military convoy on the eastern outskirts of Al-Hazaka, forcing it to retreat. The convoy, consisting of 4 armored vehicles accompanied by a vehicle belonging to the militia of QISD, tried to pass through the village, but it was stopped by the residents. The U.S. military and its allies have been illegally present in northern and eastern Syria for a long time, and in addition to looting the country's oil and grain resources, they are taking action against Syrian residents and forces in the region. Now, negotiations with the United States over a possible nuclear deal are not on the agenda of the Iranian negotiators in the Austrian capital, Vienna. Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council Ali Shamkhani said on Monday. The high government official stated the talks have been going on between Iran and Britain, China, France, Russia, plus Germany, and the representative of the European Union, and it will continue unchanged until a result is reached. He added that the negotiations with the U.S. are not on the agenda because it will not be the source of any progress. Iran and major world powers, with the United States indirectly involved, are currently negotiating in Vienna in a bid to restore the 2015 nuclear deal, from which former U.S. President Donald Trump withdrew unilaterally in 2018 and reinstated sanctions against Iran. An Iranian F-5 fighter jet crashed into a school compound in the northwestern city of Tabriz on Monday, killing 2 crews and a passersby. According to a local official, there were no casualties at the school since it was closed because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Authorities said the plane crashed into an external wall in the city's central district of Munajam. The jet had been stationed in the Shahid Fakouri Air Base in Tabriz, and it was heading back from a training mission when it encountered a technical problem that prevented it from landing. The accident was followed by a huge fire, which required the intervention of the fire brigade on the spot. Now, we've come to the end of this news brief, but remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at teleSUR English. You can also join us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Dio Martin. Thanks for watching.